Hello there. You do realise that any government made up of Tories, Labour, Lib Dems or Greens will break Britain, don't you? While the polls in Spain predict a hard shift to the right in today's national elections, the UK is slipping further to the left. And not because that's what the voters want, but because the Tory party is no longer a centre-right party and no longer delivers what the electorate demands of it. And now we have the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove coming forward saying his party has radical plans to sort out the housing mess and for the environment. This from a party that is doing its level best to destroy the country. Firstly, by massively increasing demand for housing via the route of our open borders to the point they want to get householders to take some of the copious amounts of newcomers into our homes. And secondly, by forcing people to hand over vast sums in the form of extra levies, taxes and costs to meet the elite's net zero plots. And thirdly, by increasing general taxation to the point that it becomes counterproductive to put more work into the system. And fourthly, by putting in place an ever-growing control grid to make sure dissent on many topics is actively shut down. And shutting down dissent or open debate on any issue is anti-democratic. Anyway, Gove's new plans for the environment are mainly driven, I think, by the results of the recent by-elections, especially in the seat previously held by Boris Johnson, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. The message from that outer London constituency appears to be that the ULEZ expansion pushed by the Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan is deeply unpopular, and that people are beginning to wake up to how much the ever-accelerating drive for net zero by both government and the opposition is going to cost them. So Gove is now making noises about having listened, and therefore the Tory government might slow down a bit in certain areas of net zero so as to spread the costs. And he's now warning us in a Telegraph interview against treating the environment as some sort of religious crusade, saying that the imposition on the population of too many inflexible rules leads to a backlash. Yes, but a backlash that politicians only care about at election time. And a general election is now at most 18 months away. Gove and his fellow Tories must be starting to feel the political heat already. But the heat is also being felt by Keir Starmer and his Labour Party, with both Starmer and his deputy Angela Rayner saying that they need to bear in mind the thoughts of the people over ULEZ. But remember, the London ULEZ project was kick-started by Boris Johnson, a Tory, while he was London Mayor and a member of the international C40 Cities programme that Sadiq Khan now chairs. So we might hear some comforting words from the Tories and Labour today, but they, as well as the Lib Dems, are as committed to this as the Greens are. So after an election based on a very carefully worded manifesto, whoever wins out of these four at the next general election, either by an outright win or by coalition, will put the pedal to the metal in order to make up for any lost time. With a Labour win or coalition with the Lib Dems, meaning it would be the current Tory approach, breaking Britain on roids. And after the upcoming general election, the next time you get to choose a new government will be just before the whole 2030 reset thing, i.e. far too late to do anything about it, and probably well after blackouts and the virtual destruction of the economy. While China and India continue burning humongous amounts of coal, oil and gas while they need to, and that's the bit that should really alarm us. The UK should be using all the resources available to it so as to ensure any transition to the total electric nirvana is achieved in a manageable and efficient manner. All we're seeing at the moment is panic mode, switching the lights and heating off in the hope that something, anything, will turn up. And they're switching the lights and heating off before they've even put any serious orders in for new nuclear. Forcing the pace is proving to be disastrous for the economy and for the people. And just because a few zealots superglue themselves to stuff and block traffic does not make them right. Now, Gove's radical scheme for housing involves copying Michael Heseltine's plans to set up new corporate bodies working in tandem with a centralised planning super squad in Canary Wharf fashion to push house building through across the country. And given that net inward migration is set to be larger this year than last year's record number, then they will have to move at pace, because those inward numbers will only ever now go upwards year on year. Isn't that basically how they handled PPE contracts, by the way? Need for speed and all that. Wonder who will be handing these new contracts out? I bet the talks have already started behind firmly closed doors. So that's the Tory plan to boost GDP, is it? Cram ever more people into the country and then build and build again. Fast rising populations always lead to a rise in GDP because more people leads to more consumption. And a rising GDP then allows the government to borrow and spend yet more money. A great big Ponzi scheme, with the last bit of available land being the cut-off point. Over 500,000 net last year, remember? And probably the only reason why the country hasn't yet slipped back into recession. And while this continues, we'll see UK productivity, the amount of productive work the workforce produces, slipping back. Productivity is measured by the Office for National Statistics, taking the volume of goods and services produced by the UK in a year and dividing it by the number of hours worked. And from the House of Commons Library, that source that One Penny Mordaunt is so proud of, one of the most important factors in determining living standards is productivity. How much output is produced for a given input, such as an hour of work. So rising productivity goes hand in hand with rising living standards. And what's the latest on UK productivity? Well, according to the library, in the first quarter of this year, productivity was 0.6% lower than quarter one last year. Further, it declined by 1.4% compared to the last quarter of 2022. And in 2022, we were 13% behind the US and Germany. Taxing work more and filling the country with more people would have that effect. Oh, and by the way, this is nothing to do with Brexit, because as the House of Commons Library explains, historically UK labour productivity has grown by around 2% per year, but since the 2008-2009 recession, it has risen more slowly. And that rise since 2009 has been trending at about the same rate, with a couple of downs and ups around the time of the pandemic. Our productivity in 2022 did, though, put us fourth in the G7. But there seems to be an increasing loathing of both work and productivity in the UK these days, not helped by unions who fail to acknowledge that helping workers to be more productive would actually be helping the masses. Anyway, in my estimation, cramming the country with yet more people might boost GDP, but it won't increase productivity and it won't boost GDP per capita, despite building hundreds of thousands of new homes. And as for Gove, I think he's acting like a weather vane today in order to get himself through an upcoming election. Then it'll be back to business as usual. And our establishment is just trying to find new ways of ignoring us.